Why are so many of teachers and professors in US so liberal? From my experience, conservatives tend to focus on how actions impact the individual, while liberals tend to focus on how actions impact the aggregate, community, city, state, nation, etc. As your knowledge broadens, it becomes difficult to ignore external impacts of individual actions, causing your thought process to be more focused on the aggregate impacts instead of the individual impacts. You become more liberal. By way of example, what is the impact of my conservative neighbor driving a gas-guzzling car that pollutes? In the grand scheme of things, his impact is almost nothing. He rightly believes that his global impact is effectively zero, which it is, and therefore no one should tell him not to pollute. A liberal would realize that there are millions of people like my neighbor who collectively have a substantial negative impact on the air we breathe. An education of the reality of the entire system tends to show all its inequity. Former teacher here. We're on the front lines and see the realities of a weak social safety net. We see the impacts of hunger and homelessness on kids. We see the impact on the kids of a broken immigration system. I could go on and on. One of my favorite teachers who in high school who truly cared about us students and treated us like people instead of students with a grade. I'm friends with on Facebook now and is very conservative. My favorite MSTJ teacher is super liberal. I didn't know either of their political beliefs until I became friends with them on Facebook. I really like when teachers keep their political stuff outside of the classroom. US liberal equals EU quite conservative. You're asking a platform full of liberals. They are educated. Having empathy and sympathy toward your fellow humans attracts people toward liberal beliefs. The same factors also attract people toward teaching and helping others. Higher education is also in larger population centers, due to more funding than rural areas. Rural areas tend to be more conservative. Rural areas also have more careers that do not require higher education. Teachers in rural areas can be conservative. But again, more people live in cities, meaning there are more teachers in cities and are more likely to be liberal. Majority of teacher will be liberal, especially as you increase levels. You are asking a liberal space this question, by the way, lol. Because in the free market people make more money when their employer is more productive, and make less money when their employer is less productive. The specifics may be different, but basically any private sector worker is subject to market forces. Whereas teachers and professors work in a field where every year their work is about the same. It doesn't go up or down with the market, so they don't have as much first-hand experience as to why economics and economic policies enacted by governments would matter. And when disregarding economics, liberal positions are usually associated with more freedom than conservative positions. Then that explains why reality has a liberal bias. Democrats tend to support utilizing the government to fix problems, large-scale solutions for large-scale problems. How do we ensure that every American child receives at least a rudimentary education, so they don't become a burden on society as adults? With strong public schools. I'm a Democrat and I became a teacher because I saw it as an endlessly challenging career in which I could do something concrete to help people and at least in some small way make the world a little bit better. The decades-long effort of conservatives to dismantle our public schools is one of, if not the biggest threats to our society. Because they are educated. Well, find interview of Yuri Bezmenov on internet and you will get your answers. Very simply, education and journalism jobs tend to attract liberal people. At least in terms of fiscal and criminal justice policy. The U.S. Overton window is pretty drastically to the right of where most other high-income countries are, and where the U.S. was 4,090 years ago. Most people with higher levels of formal education are aware of this. Most wealthy conservatives are aware of this too, but prefer not to acknowledge it for political reasons. Often it happens after they've taught for a while. Exposure to the different parts of society tends to make people more liberal. Seeing the best of humanity in a child who has every statistical card stacked against them, and watching as our society tears them down can do that. Seeing the worst of humanity in a child who has every advantage can do that. Teachers see the hypocrisy of the righteous parent, the love of the addict, and everything in between. The more diversity we experience, the more we begin to realize that none of us are all that different. We begin to realize that the identities and tropes that divide us are mostly manufactured. This awakening is anathema to right-wing ideology, so much of which relies on tribalism and fear. When the narratives are stripped away, most people become compassionate and inclusive, which some people would say is liberal. Most teachers, professors would say it's human. Showing a willingness to allow the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with, their own. Reddit is not the place to ask this, as it's incredibly left-leaning and not indicative of the nation as a whole or its opinion. You're not going to get a real unbiased answer here. Funny thing is 80% of us are in the middle. We disagree in small things, sure, but overall, we're the same. The fringe 10% on each side. Yikes, that's a diff story.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.